So the clock is ticking on the Geneva deal, but with Iran testing new centrifuges and the U.S. and Iran's dueling legislation over uranium enrichment and possible new sanctions, could the talks be delayed? I asked Matthew Duss, policy analyst at the Center for American Progress.
I don't think we'll see a delay. I think it may make the negotiations a bit more complicated. The latest report that I've seen from the deputy Iranian foreign minister, Arachi, said that he very much hopes that they'll complete these talks on the implementation of this interim deal by the end of January, although he did acknowledge, as all the participants regularly acknowledge, that these talks are complicated and there's difficult work to be done. But yes, the construction of new centrifuges that was announced by Iran, even though they're not apparently installing those centrifuges, does create some complications.
But it's a political move because Tehran's response has been, well, the U.S. is talking about implementing further sanctions. Tell us about the little political hot potato that's going on between the two countries.
Right. In both countries, I think you have an element of the much more hawkish political elements, both here in the United States and in Iran, who are very skeptical of this deal, who are very skeptical of the whole idea of engagement with the other country, are very suspicious. In Iran, they're very suspicious of the U.S.'s real motives. Here in the United States, many are suspicious of Iran's real motives. So you have pressure coming from both sides on both the Rouhani and the Obama administration to be as tough as possible in going into these talks. So you have both the Rouhani and the Obama administrations who are trying to move forward with these talks, to implement this deal, and to take the next 6 months to hammer out a broader, comprehensive deal, while at the same time fending off this criticism from their own countries.
Do you expect any red flags, let's say from China or France or Russia or anyone in particular? We know how Israel feels about all of this, and this is just more fuel for their fire. They have been very skeptical of the talks with Tehran all along.
Well, I think Israel, along with others in the Middle East, partners like Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries, have made their concerns very, very clear. They have they're skeptical of Iran's intentions, like many in the United States. But even though they've gone public with a lot of these concerns, I think, particularly with Israel, one of their main goals right now is trying to shape a final agreement and make sure its own red lines are honored in any final agreement. As for the P5+1, France has actually been one of the more hawkish members of the P5+1. I think you remember they were very close to a deal early in November, but France at the last moment is the one who kind of stopped that.
Let's talk just about how historic this moment is. Let's just take a step back and remember where we were with Iran 5-10 years ago. How historic is this that they're sitting down together and actually talking about this?
Right, that's a great point. I think we've become, I think, very quickly become used to the idea that Iranian and U.S. leaders would sit down and talk, whereas about 6 months ago, it was simply unheard of for the United States Secretary of State and the Iranian foreign minister to sit down around a table and talk, and yet this happens fairly regularly now. The U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman sits down with her counterpart. We have the historic phone call from President Obama to President Rouhani. And this is a sort of thing that it slowly begins to break through the years and years of tension and distrust. That's not to say we're going to be best friends with Iran, but this constant communication does give a clearer idea of what Iran perceives as its interests are, and this helps us make better policy.
Well, this is just the first step. Once this is implemented, if it's implemented, the temporary deal, then we have 6 months to install a more permanent solution. So we look forward to talking to you about that again. Matthew Duss, thank you so much, Center for American Progress, for coming into our studio today.
Thanks.